So, hi, good morning, everyone, once again. Good morning from Symbiosis Biodiversity Cell. So, today we have Kunal Shaha. I'm so happy, and I don't know since last 2 days how many times I have said this, and I have even expressed this on our Instagram pages also. Kunal is our own biodiversity club member, as well as he is our own student from Symbiosis Center for Media and Communication, Pune Institute. I do remember 2 years back when I was doing some work in the Butterfly Garden in Lavare campus, and there is this boy who came in such an enthusiasm and said, "Ma'am, are you Shilpa?" Shilpa, ma'am, I said yes. Then he said, I am so much interested in biodiversity and I do lot of documentation. And I said, okay, because there are many students who come like that and they are interested in wildlife and photography. So I said, okay, yeah, good, good. But I could see that a spark and that different kind of, enthusiasm in this boy. And I know something is different in this boy. And over the period in next 2 years till today, I could see the passion, the kind of enthusiasm and that fierce thing in Kunal, which driving him to do this biodiversity work. He is from Pune, and those who know Pune or those who are from Pune, they know that how the Pune's terrain is. We have these hillocks we call tekdis in the Pune city, and many of us we some or other time have walked or gone for a nature walk or just for a walk on those tekdis or just for the exercise. But we never have given much attention to these tekdis in a way how Kunal Shah must have given in last many years. So today we are here to understand his way to look at these tekris as a biodiversity hotspot and how wonderfully he has documented and done his work. Today though he is a fantastic photographer, but he always say that I don't want to get tagged, so you can see his wonderful photography on his Instagram page as well as he writes well on his blog and all. But today's session is not about his photography or his that kind of work. Today's is a completely different session, which I'm not going to, again express anything else. Let him talk about his work. But it is going to be a very, very different subject. And for his age, whatever he has documented or has to say about today's session, which is grassland, is it a westland or it is a wonderland? म्हणजे मराठीत सांगायचं तर पडीक खराब जमीन आहे का एकदम सुंदर जैववैविध्यतेनं भरलेला तो एरिया आहे. What is this? So this is what Kunal is going to talk about. So let's welcome Kunal to our biodiversity, our own platform. We are very proud and happy to have you. Now I'll request Abhishek to introduce Kunal to all the participants who are here today and attendees, and we can go ahead. Yes.
First of all, good morning, guys. I'm Abhishek Kumar and I am from SIOM Nasik. So let me introduce Kunal to the whole session. It's good morning to all, to one and all of my dear friends. First of all, I know it's Sunday, the day which we wait for 6 days, and I'm taking a bite of your Sunday. But believe me, it's worth taking a bite because today we are not going to bore you with some lecture regarding business tool or business era, but rather we will talk about nature, right from its tiniest arthropod to the reptiles, birds, mammal, and even stars. So let me welcome you, our guest Kunal Shah, who is the final year student in Symbiosis Institute of Symbiosis Center, sorry for my mistakes, Symbiosis Center for Media and Communication, and has been present in our biodiversity cell for last 3 years. He has a special interest in the biodiversity grassland and has been working in it for last 9 years, and also has a great photography and filmmaking skills. For more insights, we can also visit his nature blog or wildlife blog on Insta, which is at the rate KS underscore wild, or we can visit his YouTube channel that is KS underscore wild. So there are few instructions from my side and my teammate side. that to make this session go fruitful and go with the flow type, I want you to keep your mic turned off throughout the session. But please prepare your questionnaires and we will be glad taking your questions after the presentation. So now I want Kunal to start. Over to you, Kunal.
Thank you so much for such a lovely introduction. I'll directly jump into the session. Let me share my screen first. Just a minute. So can you all see my screen? I think you can.
Yes, we can.
Okay. So the session today is called Grassland. Is it a wasteland or a wonderland? So I'm sure most of you might have seen a photo of this kind, enormous grasslands and animals like wildebeest, cheetahs, wild dogs running all over the place. So do you know what this particular habitat is called and where it's found? Anybody? You can just unmute your mics and answer if you know. Anybody would like to give it a shot?
Yes, guys, this is a very common sight, not in India, of course.
I'm sure most of you might be knowing about this place because it is quite popular. So if you would like to give it a try, anybody?
From the team, Abhishek, Apurva?
It's in Africa, mostly.
Yes, that's right. Do you know what this place is called or what this landform or the habitat is called?
No.
No? Okay, no worries. So this is called a savanna, and as you rightly said, it is found in Africa. So savannas of Africa is something that we all must have heard at some point in our life, and I think this was also in our school textbooks, in geography textbooks. So savannas of Africa is something that is very popular, and there are a lot of documentaries about it. But what if I told you that there are savannas in India as well? So does this come as a shock to you? Because when I first heard that there are savannas in India, I was really surprised because Indian savannas is something that we never have heard, or this was not in our schools and nobody has told us about this. But the matter of fact is that there are enormous savannas in India as well, and a very few people know about it. So let us begin this session with a simple question. What is a savanna? Any guesses? I don't want a textbook definition of a savanna. I just want to know what you guys know what a savanna is. So anybody would like to give it a try? Come on. It's not that hard. Come on.
Yes, guys, this particular session should be, a kind of interactive session.
Let's keep it interactive and not one way. So anybody?
Ainik, are you there?
Ma'am, would you like to give it a try? What a savanna is? What do you understand by savanna?
Yeah, till you showed me, I thought that savanna is something which is only seen in Africa, not in India. So now only when you said, I thought, okay, you are saying savanna is in India also. Because savanna means huge grasslands, like ocean of grassland. So that's what is savanna means to me.
Yes, that is not wrong. That is partly correct. So savanna is an ecosystem that has a mixture of trees and grasses, and it is characterized typically by an open tree canopy and a grassy layer on the ground. The tree density in a savanna varies from savanna to savanna, and the continuous grassy understory is the distinguishing feature of any kind of savanna. So in a savanna, there's a continuous grassy layer on the ground, and the density of trees varies from savanna to savanna. So savannas can broadly be classified into three types based on the density of trees. So in this diagram below, on the left part of the diagram, there's just a grassy layer. There are no trees. So that is one type of savanna. In the middle part of diagram, you can see a few scattered trees and a continuous grassy layer. So that is the second type of savanna. And on the right part of the diagram, there's a fairly good amount of trees present, but the continuous grassy layer is still there. So that is the third type of savanna. So these are the type of savannas based on the density of trees. and the continuous grassy layer is everywhere. So whenever you see a continuous layer of grass, that is a savanna. So we look into these three types of savannas in detail. The first one is called grasslands. So in a grassland, there are near zero trees at all. It's just an open grassy region. So for example, there's Serengeti in Africa, then there's Masai Mara also in Africa. And then there's a region called Saswad at the outskirts of Pune. This photo on the left is from Saswad. And as you can see in this photo, there are no trees seen in this photo. It's just an open grassy region. So this is a grassland. Moving on to the second type of savanna, it's called a scrubland or a shrubland. So in a scrubland, there are a few scattered trees and a continuous grassy layer on the ground. So for example, the hills in Pune city. So Pune city has a number of hills within the city, and these hills are not the typical pyramids that we think of. They are more like plateaus. So they have sloping edges and they have a flat surface at the top. And these hills are predominantly scrublands, or they are savannas. So this photo on the left is from one of the Pune hills. And as you can see, there's a continuous grassy layer and a few scattered trees. So this is a scrubland or a shrubland. So the third type of savanna is called a wooded savanna. So in a wooded savanna, there's a fairly high density of trees, and it's still not dense enough to shade out the grassy layer on the ground. So the continuous grassy layer is still there. For example, there's Pench, Nagzira, Tadoba, Bandipur. All these wildlife sanctuaries and national park in India, they are all wooded savannas. So this photo on the left is from Nagzira Tiger Reserve, which is in central India. And as you can see, there's a continuous grassy layer and there's a good density of trees as well. So all places mentioned here, Pench, Nagzira, Tadoba, Bandipur, we know these places as deciduous forests and not as wooded savannas. But the truth is, these are not forests, they are savannas. Forests and savannas are two different habitats. They are two different, completely different ecosystems. They are not the same. So these places mentioned here, they are not forests, they are savannas. So then if these are not forests, then what is a forest? And why are these places being called as forests if they are not forests, they are savannas? So why are these places called as forests? So we look into this in this session. So first we need to understand what a real forest is. So a forest is a closed canopy ecosystem with a dense tree cover, and there is no grassy understory in a forest, unlike a savanna. So for example, there's Amazon rainforest, or there's Bhimashankar, Lonavala, Mahabaleshwar, Amboli. All these places in Maharashtra, they are forests. So this photo here is from Amboli. And as you can see, there is no grassy layer on the ground, and the trees are so closely packed, or they are so densely packed that they do not allow the penetration of sunlight to the ground. And that is why there's no grassy understory here. So this is a forest, and it is very important to understand that a forest and a savanna are two completely different ecosystems. So keep this in mind. So moving on. Are savannas in India a rare sight? So the answer to this is no. Savannas in India are not something rare to find. There might be a savanna right next to your house. In fact, almost the entire peninsular region of India to the east of the Western Ghats is a savanna. So this map here shows the distribution of savannas in Africa and Asia. All these colored portions, blue as well as purple, they indicate savannas. So if you look at India, almost the entire peninsular region of India is a savanna. There are also a few savannas in the northern part of the country. They have not been marked here. But you get a fair idea that almost the entire peninsular region of India is a savanna. So that's a very huge portion of the land of our country. So this brings us to a very important question. Just a minute. Okay, so why aren't we aware of the savannas of India if they cover such a large portion of the land in our country? So the reasons to this are deep rooted in our history. So during the British colonial era, the foresters trained in the forestry traditions of the West looked at these habitats from a commercial perspective. So wood, timber, and other such extracts were important to them. And since they only focused on trees, savannas with some trees in it were labeled as deciduous forests. So there go your central Indian savannas. So now you know why those places are called as deciduous forests and not as savannas. It is because of this. So due to this forestry-centric bias of the Brits, the open grassy biomes, that is scrublands and grasslands, were labeled as degraded forests or wastelands that require help. Since these lands didn't earn them enough revenue, they were either converted into forests by planting commercially valued trees, or they were given away for other purposes to generate revenue. So the Britishers left us with this nomenclature, this system of naming. So open grassy biomes with minimal or no tree cover were etched as wastelands in the minds of the governments, and the rest were termed as deciduous forests, thorny scrub forests, or some kind of forest. So when the Britishers came in India, they labeled all these habitats as per their own convenience or as per their own benefit, commercial benefit. So all the places, all the wooded savannas where there were good amount of trees present, they labeled them as deciduous forests because they were only interested in trees. And all these other types of savannas, that is scrublands and grasslands, where there are hardly any trees present, they labeled them as wastelands or barren lands because they were not of any use to them commercially. So after the Britishers left us, this system of naming or this nomenclature was carried forward. And even today, wooded savannas are called deciduous forests, and scrublands and grasslands are still called as wastelands or barren lands. So the word savanna was lost. Labeling what is not a forest as a forest causes a lot of issues, as both of these are different habitats, and these misconceptions and these wrong terminologies have created a lot of problems that we are facing even today. So during the post-independence era, a lot of transformations occurred with the Green Revolution. So these so-called wastelands were converted into forests by carrying out tree plantations of exotic species, or they were made into farmlands. A great example of this is the Gliricidia monoculture on the hills of Pune city. So the forest department did a mass plantation of Gliricidia sapium, that is a tree native to Mexico, on all the hills of Pune city that were originally savannas. So in the 1950s. Today, we only have a small portion of these hills that still have their original savanna habitat, and the rest is covered by Gliricidia that has drastically changed the ecosystem. So this photo on the left is from one of the Pune hills, that is Vetal Hill or Vetal Tekdi. I'm sure the people from Pune know about this place. So this photo was clicked in 1926, that is almost 100 years ago. And these photos on the left, these photos on the right are of the same place, of the same hill, but in 2021. So as you can see, there's a drastic change, or there is a drastic difference between both these ecosystems on the left as well as on the right. On the left, you can see an open canopy savanna ecosystem. That is, there's a continuous grassy layer on the ground and there are a few scattered trees. So this is a typical scrubland ecosystem. And on the right, you can see a closed canopy forested ecosystem. So of course, this is not a natural ecosystem. These trees have been planted. They are the Gliricidia sapium, the monoculture that we were talking about. So as you can see, there's a drastic difference between these two ecosystems, and they are of the same place, but in different times. So this on the left is the original ecosystem of this place. And on the right, this is the newly planted ecosystem of this place. So due to this transformation of the habitat, due to these plantations, over the years, a lot of savanna biodiversity was lost from these hills because of these introduced plantations. So this is something that is not at all good. So following the colonial mindset, most of us think that Indian savannas are of a recent origin and were created due to human activities. So people believe that, these savannas are not ancient or they are not natural. There were forests here before savannas. And then because of human activities like, clearing land for agriculture or urbanization. So because of these human activities, these forests got chopped down and then they were converted into these arid open savannas. So this is what people believe. So if this were true, that is, if there were forests here before savannas, then one should expect to see a sign of high tree density causing canopy closure without a grassy understory in the past. So if these were forests indeed in the past, then there should be a closed canopy ecosystem there in the past without a grassy layer, right? So let us see what research has to say about this. First, we'll look at historical records. So photographs, notes, paintings that take us back a few hundred years show that these habitats were as they are right now a few centuries ago. That is, they were savannas even a few centuries ago. So we looked at this photo here on the left. This is from one of the Pune hills, that is Vetal Hill. And this was clicked in 1926, so almost a century ago. So as you can see, there is no forest here. It was a savanna even 100 years ago. This is around a 200-year-old from somewhere in Pune. And as you can see, there are human settlements over here and there are trees. So these trees are planted. And around these settlements on these hills, there are no tall apparent trees that can be seen. So this means that this was a savanna, or this ecosystem was a savanna even 200 years ago. But historical records can only take us back a few centuries ago. So if we want to go beyond this point, then we'll have to look at paleoecological research. So paleoecological research is nothing but the study of the ecology of the past. So this is done via the mean of survey of pollen fossils. So survey of pollen fossils suggests that these lands were dominated by grassy species and typical savanna species even a few thousand years ago. So let us look at this graph on the left. This panel here shows 3 categories: moist, savanna, and scrub. So these indicate the moist species, savanna species, and scrub species. And these numbers over here are years before present. So this is 1000 years before present, 4000 years before present, 8000 years, and so on. So of course, this survey is from some place in central India. The biogeographical conditions of that place are similar to that of Pune. So human agriculture or agricultural expansion started 4000 years before present in that place. So if we were to believe in our earlier narrative that there were forests here before savannas, and due to human activities or due to agriculture, these forests got chopped down and they were converted into dry savannas. If we were supposed to believe in this, then we should see signs of savanna or high signs of savanna plant species after the 4000 year mark. That is on this side of the graph. This is what we should see. And before the 4000 year mark, there should be no savanna species seen. But as you can clearly see in this graph, savanna species were pretty much in abundance even before the 4000 year mark. So this means that Indian savannas are of an ancient nature, and they are not a result of human activities that were carried out after the 4000 year mark. So this graph takes us back around 9000 years ago. And it means that there were savannas here even 9000 years before today. So paleoecological research can only take us back these many years. And if we want to go beyond this point in time, then we'll have to look at endemic species and molecular phylogeny. So there are so many species of fauna that have evolved over millions of years to be found only in the Indian savannas. They are endemic to this region. That is, they are not found anywhere else in the world except for this region. So take, for example, the fan-throated lizard, a typical group of lizards that are found only in the Indian savannas. So molecular phylogeny suggests that these lizards have evolved over millions of years with the savanna ecosystem, and their activities are so dependent on this ecosystem that they would not survive if suddenly this ecosystem were to disappear tomorrow. So molecular phylogeny is basically the study of evolution of certain species. So let us look at this graph on the left. This green part here is the moist period in the Indian landscape. And this yellow ochre color indicates the dry period in the Indian landscape. And these numbers over here, 0, 10, 20. So these are million years before today. So this is 10 million years before today, 20 million years before today, 30 million years, and so on. So as you can see, and so this is the evolution of the fan-throated lizards. So as you can see, the Indian landscape went into a transformation around the 10 million year mark from moist plant species to dry plant species. And as you can see, the fan-throated lizards evolved around the same mark, around this 10 million year mark. So this means that there were savannas here even 10 million years before. And presence of such endemic species indicates that Indian savannas are not of a recent origin, or they are not man-made. They are indeed quite ancient. So now, considering our earlier hypotheses that these savannas are actually forests before they got degraded, we wouldn't find so many endemic species of flora and fauna that have evolved over millennia to thrive only in this ecosystem. So this proves that savannas of India are indeed quite ancient, and they are not recently formed due to human activities. So now let us look at some biodiversity that these savannas have. We'll be focusing on the biodiversity of scrublands and grasslands in particular, because as we discussed earlier, wooded savannas have wrongly been classified as deciduous forests. And there are so many national parks and wildlife sanctuaries in India that are these so-called deciduous forests that is their wooded savannas actually. And we are all aware of the biodiversity that these so-called deciduous forests possess. But scrublands and grasslands are some habitats that have been traditionally classified as wastelands or barren lands. So not a lot of people are aware that these lands are actually quite rich in biodiversity. So we'll be looking at some of the biodiversity of scrublands and grasslands of Pune, because I have traveled extensively around the scrublands and grasslands of Pune. And over the past few years, I have documented a lot of biodiversity here in such an urban city. So Pune is a blessed city in terms of nature, with a number of hills within the city. And these hills are not the typical pyramids that we draw on paper. They are actually places. So all these Pune hills are originally scrublands. Today, the Pune hills are a lot of things because of the Girisidea culture. There are a lot of habitats now on these Pune hills. But originally, these hills are scrublands. And there are still a few patches of the original scrubland habitat left on these Pune hills. So there are enormous grasslands on the outskirts of the main city at places like Saswad, Bhagapur, Deshwar. These scrublands and grasslands are home to a number of species, flora and fauna, some of which are quite rare. It's also quite surprising to see that mammals like wolves, foxes, hyenas, jackals, gazelles still live in these habitats just on the fringes of such an urban city. All these animals mentioned here, they are all typical grassland animals, and they cannot survive anywhere else except for these grasslands. So it's really quite surprising that these animals, wolves, foxes, hyenas, they all survive just on the edges of such an urban city. And it is also believed that almost around 150 to 200 years ago, so that is even before urbanization or for tree plantation activities, all these animals were existent on the hills within the Pune city. So all these animals were there inside of Pune city on all these hills, almost 150 or 200 years ago. And all these animals are typically land animals, as I said, and do not survive anywhere else except for these grasslands. So it is very important for us to conserve these scrublands and grasslands to ensure the survival of all these species. So let us look at some of the photos of birds and animals that I've clicked over the years in Pune grasslands. Starting from the top left, this here is an Amur falcon, an Indian eagle owl. So this is a Jacobin cuckoo, a red avadavat, Savannah nightjar. Then this here is an Indian nightjar. This is a yellow wattle lapwing. This here is a chorid bug, and it's sitting on a silver coxcomb flower. This scorpion is called Hottentotta papyrus. So that is the species of the scorpion. This is a monitor lizard. Then this is an Indian gazelle or a chinkara standing on the scrublands of Saswad. Then this here is a paper wasp, and she is guarding her nest over here. So all these species of flora and fauna, most of these species are typical savanna species. That is, they cannot survive anywhere else except for these savannas. So if at all these scrublands and grasslands are lost tomorrow, then we can expect a sharp decline in all these species of flora and fauna. So it is very important to conserve the Indian savannas. So now the Indian savannas face a lot of risks, or they face a lot of threats in today's times. And most of these threats are faced by scrublands and grasslands, because as we discussed, wooded savannas wrongly classified as deciduous forests. They are now national parks and sanctuaries. So they have some kind of protection. But scrublands and grasslands have traditionally been referred to as wastelands or barren lands. So most of the threats that savannas face are in these habitats. And most of these threats are actually quite huge, as in they are not in the control of citizens like us. The institutions, corporations, governments are involved in these. But in recent times, there's a new, not a new rising threat. It's not new, but it is in, this threat is on rise in the recent times. And it is from the end of citizens like us. So it is from tree plantation. Now, something that we are going to discuss in the next 5 minutes might come as a shock to you, because this is totally contradictory to what we have been learning since childhood. So tree plantation is a very well-intentioned activity, but it is important to understand that trees don't belong everywhere. Scrublands and grasslands are open, grassy dominated landscapes with little to no trees. A variety of flora and fauna is dependent on these habitats. These species prefer such open ecosystems for their survival, and they cannot be found anywhere else except for these habitats. So I'll give you a very simple example. Like a polar bear cannot survive away from the Arctics, that is its habitat. Similarly, the flora and fauna of savannas cannot survive away from a savanna. So when we plant trees in a savanna, we are actually promoting woody encroachment in this habitat. Which transforms the habitat completely from an open canopy ecosystem to a closed canopy ecosystem. So as we discussed earlier, savannas are open canopy ecosystems, and they are mostly grassy dominated landscapes. So when we plant trees in this ecosystem, we are actually promoting woody encroachment, which will result in the closure of the canopy. And it will transform the habitat completely from an open canopy savanna ecosystem to a closed canopy forested ecosystem. That will result in the decline of all the savanna dependent plants and animals that are found in these savannas, because these species of flora and fauna can survive only in the open canopy savanna ecosystem, and they cannot survive in a closed canopy forested ecosystem. So this is why tree plantation is such a huge risk on the Indian savannas, and trees shouldn't be planted at all on savannas. So right from childhood, we have all been learning that, we should plant more and more trees, and we should plant trees everywhere, wherever possible. But there are two most important questions that have been ignored, that have been almost always ignored, and that should be considered before planting trees. And that is, which trees to plant and where to plant them. Planting of random trees at random places does more harm than good. Trees should only be planted where they belong. And as we discussed earlier, trees don't belong everywhere. So planting trees where trees were already present, but they were lost due to human activities, is called reforestation. So for example, if there's an area where there were a lot of trees, or there was a forest, and then because of human activities, those forests got chopped down, and now there are no forests there, and then we go there again and plant trees. So that is called reforestation. But planting trees where trees were never present is called afforestation. It is very important to understand that reforestation and afforestation are two different things. It is very important to understand the difference between these two terms, because reforestation can be good, but afforestation almost always degrades an existing ecosystem to create a new one. So in case of scrublands and grasslands, these are grassy dominated landscapes and these are fully functional ecosystems. Trees don't belong in this ecosystem. When we go and plant trees in this ecosystem, it is not reforestation, it is afforestation, because we are introducing trees in this ecosystem. So as mentioned here, afforestation almost always degrades an existing ecosystem. That is, we are degrading the existing savanna ecosystem to create a new forested ecosystem. So this is not good. Tree plantation in savannas is absolutely unnecessary and it serves no ecological purpose whatsoever. It does more harm than good. It doesn't help us tackle climate change. Instead, it increases the risk of the same. So people believe that we plant trees because trees provide us with oxygen and they help us suck atmospheric carbon. So they are good carbon sinks. So this is not at all wrong. But people also believe that scrublands and grasslands are wastelands and they do not help us tackle climate change. They are completely useless in the fight against climate change. So this is not true. Research proves that scrublands and grasslands or savannas help equally, if not more than forests, in the process of tackling climate change. That is, in the process of carbons sucking up all the atmospheric carbon. So in case of forests, we can actually see tall trees right in front of us and we can see the amount of carbon that a tree has stored. But in case of savannas, people believe that what can these small grasses do to suck up atmospheric carbon? Research proves that savanna plant species are bigger under the ground than what they are on the surface. So these savanna species have huge network of roots and storage organs under the ground where they work. So basically they suck up all the atmospheric carbon and they store it in the soil as well as all these storage organs under the ground. So they are as important as forests in the fight against climate change and as an ecosystem as well. They are as important as forests. So whether a tree is native or invasive differs from habitat to habitat. So people also believe that, we are planting native trees. We are planting trees that belong to India. We are planting banyan trees. Which belong to India. So what's the harm that it can do? So tree is native or invasive differs from habitat to habitat. So even if a certain plant species is native to India, it does not necessarily mean that it is native to all the different types of habitats found in the country. And any kind of tree plantation in a savanna is invasive for that habitat, because as we discussed earlier, these are grassy dominated landscapes with little to no trees. So any kind of tree planting here is invasive, no matter what kind of tree you are planting. So then where should you plant trees? The best places to plant trees is along roads, in your gardens, in your society, in your workplace, or in open areas within the city. So now when I say open areas within the city, I do not mean places, hills or other natural places in the city. Open areas within the urban limits of the city. Almost all the tree plantation activities that are carried out by the various NGOs are misguided. Even if the trees that are being planted are native, they are almost always planted in savannas, mostly scrublands and grasslands, due to the impression of these habitats being barren. So all these various NGOs that conduct tree plantation activities, almost all of these activities are misguided because they almost always plant trees in scrublands and grasslands. And as we discussed, scrublands and grasslands are not barren lands. So this is what they consider them as. They consider that these lands are barren. But as we have discussed throughout this session, they are not barren lands. They are equally important ecosystems. And any kind of tree plantation here is very risky. But as these NGOs carry all their activities in scrublands and grasslands, these activities are misguided. So do not participate in these activities at all. Do your own research. Consult professional ecologists and environmentalists before planting trees. And experienced tree plantation groups do not qualify as ecologists or environmentalists. So these groups might be experienced in the art of tree plantation, but they are not scientists. So always consult professional environmentalists who are active in the field of science. So as I said earlier, Indian savannas face many other threats, and most of these threats are faced by scrublands and grasslands. So over the last few years, savanna plants and animals have been on a decline due to habitat loss created by tree plantations in savannas, as well as due to other threats like urbanization, conversion to farmlands, mining, and treating savannas as dumping ground because they are considered as wastelands. A great example of this is the great Indian bustard, a critically endangered bird which is on the verge of extinction. So I'm sure most of you might have heard about this bird. Sadly, only a few hundred individuals of this species are left in the wild. And the main reason for this is habitat loss. And there are many more savanna species in line if savannas are not conserved. So conservation of Indian savannas is extremely important if we want to conserve all these savanna dependent flora and fauna. So now we move on to one of the most important slides of this presentation. How we individuals conservation of savannas. The very first thing that we all can do is call them savannas or their vernacular equivalent. For example, Marran in Marathi or Gautar Pradesh. They are not bad and are certainly not deciduous forests. We must understand and recognize the importance of these savannas because, like forests with tall green trees, these dry savannas are equally important habitat and they are home to a unique variety of flora and fauna. We must understand that activities such as tree plantations in these habitats, however well-intentioned they are not at all ecological. We should always think scientifically and not emotionally when it comes to nature. So once we start acknowledging and appreciating the identity of our savannas, only then can make policies that favor not only the forests, but also these ancient savannas of our country. So as we discussed earlier, wooded savannas wrongly being classified as deciduous forests, and now they are national parks and sanctuaries. So they have some kind of protection. But scrublands and grasslands are something that have been traditionally called as wastelands. There are a few grasslands in our country that have been declared as wildlife sanctuaries. So for example, there's Mayureshwar Wildlife Sanctuary at the outskirts of Pune. Then there's Rehkuri Wildlife Sanctuary, which is also a grassland in Maharashtra. So these grasslands do have the status of a wildlife sanctuary, but they are not called as grasslands. They are called as thorny scrub forests. So it's good that they have the legal protection, but now it's high time that we start calling them savannas and not forests. So only then can we make policies that favor forests as well as these ancient savannas of our country. And the most important thing that we all can do is create awareness. Create as much awareness about the Indian savannas as you can. So as I started this session by saying, Indian savannas or savannas in India is something that not many people know about. So it's our duty now that we should create as much awareness about this as we can. Even I have a lot of friends that engage in tree plantation activities that are carried on scrublands. I'm sure most of you might be knowing people that engage in these tree plantation activities. And it is not their fault because there is not enough awareness about scrublands and grasslands in our country. So now that we know about these habitats, it is our duty to create as much awareness as we can. So go and talk to your friends, talk to your family members, tell them about the Indian savannas, tell them about these habitats, the biodiversity that these habitats contain. You can also use your own social media handles to create a lot of awareness, because in the past few years, I myself have been creating a lot of awareness about the Indian savannas through my social media. And I can see the positive change. I can see that more and more people are being aware or getting aware of these savannas. And I can see the positive impact that has been created or I'm creating. And I'm sure all of you can do this. So create a lot of awareness. So now on this note, we move on to questions. Before we start with the questions, I'd like to make a small announcement. So I have been working on a film since the past 2 years. So the film is of course ready now, but this film is about the fan-throated lizard. So we talked about the fan-throated lizard earlier in this presentation. I'd like to read out the synopsis of this film. It's very short. So the film is called Savannah Warriors. Savannah Warriors is a film about a tiny yet a fierce warrior of the scrublands, the fan-throated lizard. It is the first ever film about the fan-throated, a species found in the Indian subcontinent. So this is the first ever film about these species in the world. It's summer, the breeding season of the fan-throated lizard. The males run around and climb up elevations to flash their colorful fans, to claim their territory and to impress the females around. They can get desperate to attract the females and do not tolerate the presence of any other males in their territory. They would do anything to prove their supremacy, even fight to the death if that's what it takes to emerge victorious. Prepare yourself to witness a lot of action and drama in this film, coming soon. So this film is about the fan-throated lizard, and these are highly dramatic and interesting creatures. So the males have a colorful fan on their neck. This here is a male, and as you can see, it has got a very brightly colored fan on its neck. So the males flash their fans to attract all the females around, and they are highly territorial in nature. So if any other male enters their territory, they can resort to fighting to prove their supremacy. And if none of the males surrender, then they can even kill each other, or they can fight to the death to emerge victorious. So as mentioned here, prepare yourself to witness a lot of action and drama in this film, coming soon. So this film will be releasing soon, and you can track all the updates of this film on my social media. So that is on my Instagram and also on my YouTube, mentioned over here. So feel free to check them out. So now let us move on to questions. You can unmute yourself and ask your questions, or you can type them in the chat box. And you can also reach out to me for further discussions, questions, or just to follow and support my work on my social media handles that have been mentioned here. And if you want to be more formal with your questions, you can of course write an email and I'll get back to you. So questions, anybody? No questions are stupid. You can ask anything at all. Go ahead.
Fantastic. I really, I can't believe means it's a very systematic and a sincere effort I can see here in your presentation. A boy of your age and the passion of photography, filmmaking, this particular presentation can go any other way than this, I thought. But the way you came up with this kind of a sincere and descriptive, yeah, it was a descriptive, but the way you told us, explained us, you just glued us to the screen. So beautiful, wonderful. So students, you can ask questions. You can unmute yourself. You can, no?
Yeah, they can. And if they are not comfortable with that, they can also type them in the chat box, and I'll answer.
You can close your.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Just a minute. Stop share. Okay. Okay. So there are, I think, a few. Okay. What can we do to promote these grasslands apart from creating awareness? So at this point, awareness is something that we can do, and promotion of grasslands. So the grasslands of India have been systematically degraded, as we discussed throughout this session. But so grassland restoration is a thing that is upcoming. So like we restore forests by planting trees, there is something called as grassland restoration that the scientists have been working on. But apart from supporting this cause, I don't think we as citizens can be a part of it, because a a lot of study and a lot of scientific research is needed for the restoration of grassland. So it is not as easy as going and planting trees. So of course, we can participate in or we can volunteer in these grassland restoration activities that have been or will be carried out by the various organizations that have been working on grasslands in our country. And creating of awareness is something that is very powerful. So as I said earlier, there are many people, or even I have friends, and you might be knowing people that engage in tree plantation activities on grasslands. So even if we are able to convince them that please do not plant trees here because these are important habitats, even if we are able to do this, then we're doing a lot for the grassland ecosystem. So creation of awareness is something that is very powerful and very underrated. So I had no idea that forests are actually savannas. So not all the central Indian forests are savannas. Some of them are savannas, some of them are wooded savannas, and some of them are actual forests. So another set of research needs to be carried over here to actually determine the origin of these habitats. So, you know, over the years, these ecosystems have been a lot of transformations, and a lot of these transformations have been brought about by human activities. So now most of these or some of these ecosystems even have mixed habitats. That is, even in one reserve, a part of that reserve is a forest and a part of that reserve is a savanna. So even that's the case, the forests, some of them and some of them are forests. So research needs to be carried out to determine what is what and what can we do to conserve them in future. Very nice, very informative session. You, eye opener. Well, yes, creating awareness as a keep it up. Thank you. The northeast part of India, especially Mizoram, has grasslands. Yes, so you might have heard of Kaziranga. It is a wildlife sanctuary in Assam, Iceland, and you can find rhinos there. So rhinos are grassland animals as well. So yes, there are grasslands, but most of the savannas of India are concentrated in the peninsular region of our country. So to the east of the Western Ghats. So Western Ghats are high rainfall receiving forests, and towards the east of these Western Ghats, you might have heard about, you know, the rain shadow region that we have learned in geography. So this rain shadow region is nothing but they are savannas, scrubland and grassland mostly. Great presentation. It was informative. Thank you.
So
Conservation of, just a minute, I'll read out this question once. Conservation of grasslands of Bihar is my topic of internship using data science approach. This was informative presentation, helped a lot in my research too for such an, okay. Thank you so much. Grasslands of Bihar, conservation, this is a great topic and great work. Good going. Okay, so somebody was asking a question, I think.
Asking question, but the presentation was just mind blowing, and most of the thing I think I even don't know about the thing that every tree does not belong to every place, or why we don't know about or haven't heard savanna and many other things that difference between afforest and reforestation. I just want to tell the guys that we have floated our feedback form in the chat section to fill the feedback, which makes to improve, and it will also increase the concentration and boosting power of our friends.
So as you said, somebody in the chat as well said that probably the books for school children should be read. So that is true. So most of our geography textbooks, or even we have something called science in schools, and most of this environmental science or most of our geography texts are, you know, they contain all this traditional, not traditional, they have all this brainwashed knowledge that we have since the time of the British. So it is high time that these books are updated and they are rewritten and with new information. because so research about savannas is something that is very new. So all the research about savannas has been out in the past 10 years. So this is pretty much new, and we have a lot of evidence to support that there are ancient savannas. These savannas in India are ancient, and now it's high time that we should update our education material to create awareness right from the young age.
So
Okay,
yes,
amazing
and
session.
Kunal, when right now in last 1 or 2 years, whenever there is a plantation drive, I really feel like instead of planting, people, banyan trees, someone should go for, babur, boar, and even some, grass species also. I really look up to those days now that instead of, as you said, banyan and all those trees, we should plant alongside the trees where we are already expanding the roads and killing all those trees. But instead of that, what we are doing, we are killing those trees and we are going on the barren lands and planting banyan trees and people trees and all. So
Yeah.
it's really heartbreaking. But as you said, awareness is the key. They
Or
don't know. We have to tell them, and it's up to we all of in our hand to take this knowledge ahead and slowly convince people and change this plantation drive wrong beliefs. Yes.
Yeah. So from what I believe, actually no kind of tree plantation is required in these scrublands because they are actually fully functional ecosystems, and so these grassy species and these typical savanna species, they can propagate themselves and they can maintain the ecosystem by themselves. So we need not go and interfere, and we need not, plant grassy species or plant any other species. Any kind of tree plantation is not required here.
Okay.
But yeah, of course, instead of planting banyan trees, if at all it
Ah,
is if tree plantation is a must for somebody, then it is better to plant these species than forested species.
right.
But as per my belief, no kind of tree plantation is required at all. So somebody once said, the best help to nature is not helping at all.
Right.
That is not interfering in any manner. That is the best help that we can do to nature, because nature can sustain itself. Okay, so somebody is raising their hand. Apurva.
So,
Apur.
hi Kunal, this is Apurva.
Hi.
First of all, I would like to say that it was a wonderful session and very informative as well. Got to know the many things which I was not aware regarding the biodiversity. I have a very generic question. When and what triggered you and you found that biodiversity is something that is pulling you?
So actually, I started with bird watching when I was in school. So I was very young. And one of my friends was into bird watching. So it was through him that I got into this hobby. And then from there, it was a never ending journey. So I just kept on exploring different aspects of nature. So from birds, I went into mammals, insects, and slowly and steadily, I just kept on increasing my knowledge, and I just got more and more into it, more and more passionate about it.
And I guess you are most of the time out in the field.
I am. I am.
That's the main thing because nowadays we don't want to leave our houses and Netflix and our phone and all, but you are that one person I know that always walking along all the hills and outside. So that's the thing I think.
So anybody, any questions at all, you can ask them. And if you have a question in the future, you can of course reach out to me on my social media. I'll also type my email ID in the chat.
Harini, you put our feedback form once again in the chat box. People today kind of it's good we a very small group today, but still I'm amazed to see that everyone we remain till the end. So it will be very important and helpful if you fill up the feedback form. And I guess, yes, we can end the session. So thank you very much, Kunal.
Ma'am, just one thing. So in the last point, I mentioned that we should create more and more awareness about the Indian savannas. So we discussed a lot of things in this session, and I'm sure that most of you will forget a lot of these things because all of these things are new. So it is very difficult to remember everything. So for that purpose, I have gathered various articles about this topic, and I've made one link that contains all these articles. I'd like to share that in the chat box.
Wow.
So if at all in future, when you are creating awareness, you have something to refer to so that you are scientific in your approach. So for that matter, I have created this and I'll share it in the chat box. And I request you to copy this somewhere else because after this session, this will be gone. So just copy paste it somewhere else.
Okay,
that
I'll
you-
also take this because sincerely, I also learned so many new things.
So it contains a lot of articles, all the things that we covered in this session. So history of savannas, how these savannas are ancient in nature, then why tree plantation is risky on these habitats, how savannas help in tackling climate change, how they help in carbon sequestration. So all these things have been mentioned in all these articles. So just go through them. And with that, that's it from my end.
So before we end this session, I just want you to give my best wishes for your movie. Best of luck
And do support,
from
guys.
my whole side.
Do support this film on my Instagram because I'll be releasing it very soon. Thank you so much again.
We all have eyes on that. Don't worry. We all have eyes on that.
So Abhishek, you can take it ahead with a vote of thanks now.
Okay, so finally, I want to thank Mr. Not Mr. I forgot every time. I want to thank thank Kunal and our teammate who just used their maximum to make this session so interactive, and all the person who are attending this session. I greatly want to thank you, and it's a gratitude for me and my teammates that you all are here. Thanks a lot.